Good morning and welcome to Trialogue's October webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today and making time to join us for what I think is a very important topic. And certainly from your registrations, the indication is that there's a lot of interest around it. So today we'll be dealing with building sustainable mentorship and continuous development models for teachers. So thank you very much for joining us today for that topic. I'm Sheldon Morias, joining you from Trialogue. I'll be moderating today's discussion, which is being presented in partnership with the Telkom Foundation. Thank you to the Telkom Foundation, one of our great supporters. You can see them as we work with them at the Trialogue Business and Society Conference, as well as our handbook, which I will give you more details about, which we are due to present to you today. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll just give it a couple of minutes as people log on so that you don't miss anything. To our audience, let me just run through a couple of house rules. For those of you who haven't used our new interactive platform, possibly during our conference or previous webinars, it's a really great platform. You'll be able to engage with your fellow delegates in the audience. You'll be able to tell us who you are, share your comments, your thoughts, as well as being able to pose questions to the panelists, who will then, I'll put it to them and they'll be able to answer that. So in the chat functionality, you can chat, and if you want to ask a question, type your question in and then just hit the ask the question button there, and we'll be able to see it. I'll also share a couple of polls with you throughout our discussion, which will be really interesting to drive our conversation, to get your thoughts on some of the challenges, some of the possible solutions that one could face in dealing with teacher development and support. Thank you very much. I see more people are coming online. Let's jump straight into it. There's a lot for us to cover in today's webinar, so let me jump straight in. So just to contextualize the conversation for today, research conducted by Stellenbosch University, Teacher Demographic Dividend, and research on social economic policy last year revealed that many teachers are stressed, dissatisfied, and would consider leaving the profession, and coupled with the context and a concern that I know many in the education industry and sector have, is the high waves of or the waves of anticipated retirements which are coming up. And while we do have a strong cohort of newly qualified teachers coming in every year, there's an experience a gap there, right? You've got these experienced teachers who've been in the profession, who understand the soft skills around it, the technical skills around it, leaving the profession, and you've got newer cohort coming in who are in the profession already, but maybe don't have the requisite level of experience, and that's where the mentorship, continuous development is so important as well, and many of the new teachers report feeling unsupported, overwhelmed as they navigate the world of professional teaching. But I want to also highlight some of the opportunities and the encouraging points. The research also shows that many of the teachers remain committed and passionate about making a positive contribution to society by educating young children. Now, with this in mind, I'm looking forward to today's discussion as we unpack how companies can use their influence, their reach, their resources to close, to better support teachers, NPOs, and government, to drive the right type of development and mentorship. So thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights and time with us today. And thanks to you, our audience, again, for joining us this morning. Our monthly webinars are 90 minutes. So we'll have a lot more time to delve into it, but I have to warn you, before we know it, those 90 minutes are up, and there's so many more questions and comments that we'd like to share. So let's pack that all in. Just for those who joined a bit late, a few technical points. So our platform allows you to follow the discussion, connect with your fellow delegates, pose questions, as I've mentioned, vote in our polls, and also rate the session as well. So please, I encourage you to use the chat box to connect with your fellow delegates and share your thoughts. You're also encouraged to ask a question. You can do that by clicking on the green Ask a Question bar or button before typing in your question. If possible, please indicate who you'd like to pose it to. I will draw from the Q&A box and then pose that to our panelists. Please do keep your questions short so that we're able to get through as many as possible. So thank you very much. We'll post the link to a short survey at the end of the session. Please do share your thoughts. We really do appreciate your thoughts on what works, what doesn't work, what you'd like to hear in future webinars so that we can craft them to be as useful to you. And then just finally, the session is being recorded and an article and a full recording will be made available to everyone who registered in the next week or two. So thank you very much for that. Let's move on to the agenda. Let me take you through what our agenda will be this morning. I will soon turn to our opening statements from our speakers. Danny Matebula from the Telkom Foundation, he's the project manager for ICT integration. Omashni Naidu, the executive director of SchoolNet South Africa, and Giles Gillette, the CEO of the National Association of Social Change Entities in Education. Many of you will know them as NASCI. We'll then open up to the moderated Q&A, where I will draw from your questions to the panelists, and then we'll turn to our closing comments from each of the panelists, just to leave us with a final thought on that regard. So we're going to put up the first poll now, and this will help us gauge who is in our virtual room with us today. So we'd like to know which type of organization you represent, and then this will just help the panelists and I shape the discussion to make it as effective and tailored for you. So I'll leave that up for a bit as you post your answers. Okay, great to see those coming in. Great to see some new faces in the room, some familiar names as well. Familiar new names, not new faces. Some familiar names as well. So that's great to see, and thank you for joining us and making time. I know we're all very busy and steaming towards the end of the year. So thank you very much for making time, for always joining us on these really critical discussions and our webinars, which are fascinating. Okay, so those are coming in. So that's great to see. See there. Okay. We've got 63% NPO representation. That's great. Big business and small and medium businesses is in the room as well. Consultants, academics, great. Government, really great to see that. Private foundations as well. So that's really great to see. Thank you so much. That will help us shape the conversation. Now, as I'd mentioned, we've got a couple of familiar names, but to those of you who are new, I'd like to welcome you to our CSI and nonprofit network. A special thank you, welcome if you're a first-time member and joiner joining us today. So let me tell you a bit about Trialogue before we go into the discussion. Well, we're one of a few consultancies that focuses exclusively on responsible business. We do this through our consulting services as well as through our knowledge sharing platforms, such as the webinar. And then all of this aims to, make CSI in South Africa more effective. The two main types of consulting that we do are CSI strategy development and monitoring and evaluation. And we're currently hard at work, and I don't even think that word captures it, putting together the 2025 Trialogue Business in Society Handbook. And I will share in the chat box, I will share a link to the pre-order form for you to get your hands on that early. It will be launched on the 2nd of December on Giving Tuesday. So look out for it. Really rich. This year's focus is on M&E and impact and measurement as well to make our CSI more effective. So thank you very much to all of those of you who contributed in any sort of form in terms of research as well. So thank you very much to make that a really rich edition. It's in its 28th edition. Can you believe that already? So really a red letter day on the CSI calendar in South Africa. And we've obviously got our conference, which we've actually started planning for. And if you've seen our LinkedIn post, we'd like to get your thoughts on where you think we'll be hosting it next year as well. And then just a reminder, the write-up and the recording of this webinar will be made available on the Knowledge Hub and loaded there. And I'd like to share just a bit about the Knowledge Hub with you. You may know our other platforms, but the Knowledge Hub is there as well. And it's actually our year-round platform where we share knowledge, share information, the latest data, the latest research on the various development sectors and responsible business. And insights. The Knowledge Hub offers Apologies, I've been told there wasn't you couldn't hear the audio on that. I will share that video in the chat link to that in the chat function. But really do go visit the Knowledge Hub. More importantly, I'll share the link to the Knowledge Hub in the chat. Really do go and visit it. It is our repository of all Trialogue's primary research, articles, work from our corporate partners, as well as NPOs. And importantly, for NPOs, we've got the NPO directory where you're able to list your NPO, what you do, and how people can get in touch with you, often used by corporates and other organizations looking to find NPOs that they can partner with on that regard. So just before we get into the context of teacher development, I'm going to put up the second poll, which speaks to today's topic. What do you believe is the biggest barrier to implementing teacher mentorship programs in South Africa? I'll leave that up for a little while you vote on that. Thank you very much. I see the votes coming in there, so that's great. We've got teacher development is overlooked. Okay. Insufficient time in teachers' schedules, that's coming through strongly on that front. Lack of standardized frameworks and guidelines as well mentioned. Teacher resistance or low buy-in. Lack of mentors, lack of funding and resources as well, and hopefully we can address that in today's conversation, and all of the others that are coming through. So very strongly coming through, insufficient time in teachers' schedules as well. So timing, and I mean, that's similar to what we've seen in other research reports, where teachers are saying, we just don't have the time, often bogged down by administration, and you'll speak to some of those statistics coming up in a bit as well. So thank you for that. If you've just joined us, you can also vote in our earlier poll. Just scroll down the board on the platform, and you'll be able to vote in that. And let us know where you're joining us from, as well as voting in the current poll. I see votes still coming in there. So thank you very much for that. So while you're doing that, let's go into the context. So we currently have around just under 500,000 teachers registered with the South African Council of Educators, and all teachers to be registered and recognized need to register with SACE. So for the last 14 years, we've had the integrated strategic planning framework for teacher education and development, which has been the guiding framework used by government, which has driven teacher development and policy and thinking around it. We've now subsequently moved this year to the SACE strategic plan. So government and SACE working together on that one, and that's become the guiding framework, 2025 to 2030 as well. Now, 2030, as we may know, lining up with the National Development Plan and many of the goals in that plan. There, so interesting to see what comes out of the past 14 years and how we look at the next 5 years to 2020 to 2030. Now, the DBE also has the new teacher induction program. Now, I'd spoken to you, I'd mentioned about new teachers coming in, often as with any other profession, new cohort of trained, qualified employees coming into the workplace, into the professional place, but there's a lot of development that still needs to continue and help them in that regard. And teaching is no different in this regard as well. So it has 4 pillars: mentoring, training, professional development, and peer support. And through today's conversation, I think we'll have each of them coming out, not only just for new teachers, but for continuous teacher development as well, because all 4 of those pillars play such an important role in the continuous development of teachers. Some of the research that's come out and mentioned by government as well is that mismatch. So KZN being one province, with a high number of unemployed qualified teachers, despite around, between 3,000 to 4,000 open and vacant teaching posts. And you'll see shortly why some of that misalignment happens and comes about. So if we look at more, now drilling down into the research, as I'd mentioned earlier, that Stellenbosch University report, which was released in December last year, teacher preferences and job satisfaction in South Africa. So looking into their psyche on that front as well. So 50% of teachers citing that they would want to leave the profession in the next 10 years. Now that's concerning. And while the authors note that, you may not get that, that high number of teachers leaving, it just speaks to the dissatisfaction and the state of mind and state of being of teachers who are obviously crucial to the education system. 70% saying, they're bogged down in administrative tasks, so taking away from, I suppose, their passion, which is teaching and interacting with the children as well. And I'm sure all of us can empathize with that, or at least draw parallels from that. You may be in your job or your career based on the subject matter of your career, but we do know that there is an administrative side to all of our roles, to ensure that businesses continue to run and function properly in that regard. But how do we address it, to hopefully bring that number of 70% down? And then if you look at, 40% of teachers indicating that nothing would convince them to work in a rural area. Now, this is highly critical because of the demographics, the makeup of our country. We can't at any stage leave rural schools, rural children behind, because the focus and just the economic system and the way it's designed, with greater emphasis on your metros, your cities, your towns. There needs to be an often greater emphasis and greater effort in terms of how do we support teachers in rural areas, as well in that regard. So if you look at why teachers want to leave, to go back to the point, just again to look at their mind, their psyche, their context, 35% believing that, feeling overworked, 34% underpaid, 33% administrative burden, and further studies, which I suppose is encouraging in one regard, because you've got 20% of teachers saying, well, I'd consider leaving so that I could further my studies. Hopefully those studies being furthered in teaching and them coming back into the profession, if that were to come through. An interesting stat, and this just for us to seed it and, keep it in the back of our mind. There were higher rates of teachers who felt overworked and underpaid in high fee schools compared to no fee and low fee schools, which often and obviously have fewer resources, weaker infrastructure, weaker support systems as well. Yet, you see those type of statistics coming through. Okay, so let's put up the third poll now. If you could prioritize one form of support for newly qualified teachers, what would it be in the first 2 years? What would it be? I'll leave that up for a bit while you vote in that poll. Okay. Thank you. Seeing that coming through. Thanks. Keep your votes coming through on that regard. Okay, great to see those coming through. Let's see how what your voting is telling us. Okay. 42%, at around 40%, a dedicated mentor from within their school, reduced teaching load to allow for learning and reflection, regular coaching on lesson planning and classroom management, that coming through highly as well, peer support networks and professional learning communities, around 18% on that front, psychosocial and emotional well-being, and then access to quality teaching resources and materials there. So I think the two main ones coming through, regular coaching or on lesson planning and classroom management, which I think is critical, and then a dedicated mentor from within their school. I think someone that they can draw on quite quickly. So that's great. Now let's look at what our Trialogue research is briefly telling us. As we know, education receives both the highest support in terms of financial support, but then also in terms of the number of companies who invest in education as part of their CSI. And then if we look at the types of intervention that are being invested in, teacher development gets an average of around 12% of CSI spend there. So that's from our I suppose the latest Trialogue research, but we do know the 2025 handbook is on its way, and I'll share the link in the chat for you to pre-order and just find out more about what this year's handbook is about. We're really excited to have that launching to you on the 2nd of December. Okay, let me put up the final poll before I introduce our panelists. For us to have a look at, beyond financial contributions, what's the most valuable role that companies can play in supporting teacher mentorship and development. So I'll leave that up a bit. And I think that then gets the ball rolling on what some of the things companies can do and should be thinking about when, investing in that, in teacher development as part of their education spend and investment there. And it's not just about financial, as we've seen from a number of conversations we've had this year. There are other resources, strengths that the corporate world can lend to NPOs, to the various departments, whether it be provincial or National Education Department on that front there. So let's see how that poll is coming in and what your thoughts are on that one there. Remember, you can always go back to the board and vote in any of the polls that you may have missed as well during the discussion. Okay, so if we look at this here as it comes through, thank you very much on our other poll. That's great. Okay, your vote's still coming in on the fourth poll. Cool. Thank you very much for your for all the chats, the engagement on that front there. Do remember I will be drawing from the Q&A board. So please do pose your questions, keep them brief, and I will then share them with our panelists as well throughout the discussions. Okay, so let's see how those votes are coming in on our last poll. Okay, facilitating partnerships between schools and implementing organizations, that's coming through strongly. So facilitation role there, sharing expertise, example, project management, monitoring and evaluation, so lending expertise there as well. Long-term commitment to specific schools or cohorts of teachers, so possibly adopting schools in a region, in a district. Advocating for policy changes and improved teacher conditions. Again, so using network, using influence on that regard there, and then creating platforms for knowledge sharing and best practice exchange. So I think that's really important. Providing technology and digital learning tools, that's coming through as well. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. On all of those polls this morning. I now want to turn to our speakers who will be taking us through and engaging in the conversation. And thank you very much for all of you for joining us. We've got Danny Matebula, the Project Manager, ICT Integration from the Telkom Foundation, our sponsors for today's webinar. So thank you very much for joining us, Danny, and thank you to the team there. Omashni Naidu, the Executive Director of SchoolNet South Africa, and Giles Gillette, the Chief Executive Officer of NASCI on that regard. So I'm just going to ask my speakers just to go through our discussion. I will come to you one by one for your opening comment. Please only switch your camera on when I come to you, and then for the general discussion, we'll leave our cameras and our videos on so that the spotlight comes to you immediately after or immediately as you speak. So Danny, you're up first. Thank you very much for joining us again today. So Telkom, obviously is a big investor in education, various elements of education, drawing from your business, your core business functions such as ICT. So tell us about the foundation strategy on teacher development and mentorship.
Thank you, Sheldon, and good morning to my fellow panelists and those who are also listening through the webinar. In terms of Telkom strategy, but I want to first shift our focus. I know you'll understand why I'm coming to this phase first. When we look at the triangle of education, which talks about the at the top of the triangle is the learner, the parent, as well as the teacher. So when we look at that focus, and it tells you about the collaboration and the relationship between these three key figures, and the importance of them being in the child's life in terms of education. So the parent will provide the emotional support and life lessons and stability in terms of the home environment, and making sure that the learner is provided at home. And then you have the second parent, which is a teacher at school, who creates a positive and effective learning environment for the learner at the school. And then you have a learner who is a central figure for this triangle of education. So the benefit for the benefit of that learners, it's important to have a strong communication between the parent, the learner, as well as the teacher. So in terms of Telkom Foundation, we look at that triangle of education and then say, who, if we want to impact more in terms of mentorship, collaboration, education, teacher development, how do we do that? And then we take that key element, one of the key elements, which is the teacher out, and say, how do we invest in terms of teacher development in that space? Obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, that we are a telecommunications company. We are experts in terms of communications and rolling out of infrastructure and all those things. We cannot do that alone. We have to look at implementing partners. You go deep and then you look for these implementing partners. And then you look at credibility, the work that they've done, and the relationship that they develop within the education space, and the trust and credibility with the teachers. So in terms of teachers development and training, we provide teachers with laptops, mobile data or connectivity, and access to content, obviously online content, zero rated, making sure that there is no that we eliminate that data charges in that regard. And, with us providing those resources, we then say, we've provided these resources. In order for us not to have a white elephant in this strategy, what do we need to do? We then look at the ICT integration. ICT integration will talk about the teaching and learning, impacting knowledge to the teachers, and then making sure that they understand that technology is not a subject of taboo, but it's a subject that can assist in terms of the development of themselves, as well as the development of the education system and the learners that they are responsible for when they are at school. So in that doing, we then acknowledge that there is a leadership development that needs to be fostered within the within that space, where then we're fostering the collaboration among teachers, the teachers, as well as the schools around the area, through the community of practices, promoting peer learning and partnerships, and then we then, you spoke about in your states that some of the teachers, they feel not empowered, overwhelmed in terms of the work that they have to do and other things. But when we looked at our strategy, we felt that there's that element of a psychosocial support that is missing. And you will appreciate the fact that when you bring in psychosocial support, it's not a forced element that we force everyone to attend the psychosocial support, or get for spoon-fed in terms of their well-being, but we make it available. We advocate and making sure that teachers are aware of it, that they can access it, that they can access this type of psychosocial support. Because if you give the teacher psychosocial support and then and engage in that regard, you're making the environment a little bit easier and tolerant for them to work, and they can be able to focus on the learning and the teaching in the classroom. ICT integration infrastructure also assist teachers in terms of own content development, and you will appreciate. And I think my fellow panelist Omashni will talk deeper into this, because she's one of the implementers for Telkom Foundation in terms of the work that they do, mentorship of the teachers, ICT being not the taboo, but also the teachers taking ownership in terms of developing their own content. And I think I would leave it right there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you so much for that. And a great segue into Omashni, who, can you see me? Just a minute. There we go. Great segue into Omashni, the Executive Director of SchoolNet SA. Omashni, if I could ask you to turn on your camera. Looking at SchoolNet South Africa, and Danny touched on it in terms of the implementation, but there, SchoolNet SA obviously manages several large teacher development programs. Tell us about the organization's work on teacher development and what the programs focus on.
Thank you so much, Sheldon, for the question. SchoolNet South Africa is a public benefit, not-for-profit company. And, I think our work is just on a powerful belief that technology, when paired with the right kind of teacher, can be an important lever of change and transformation in this country. And I think when we hear the words digital technology or digital learning, we seem to believe that it's about the hardware, about the technology, but our work is about designing to fundamentally shift how teachers teach and learn using devices to excite and engage learning in the classroom. And I think this has been missing for a long time. And our work is primarily in under-resourced schools. So our programs are not on the tools themselves. And even though we use the tools as a lever of change, it is more about the pedagogical skills. How do we use the content in terms of whatever we've got to teach, but using it in effective ways? And part of our mentorship capacity is that we use the cognitive apprenticeship model, which basically says that we must be able to model, scaffold the learning, and then step away so that teachers gain independence, as Danny was alluding to. And I think the key sort of aspect that we're looking at is creating independent teachers who are confident and able to use digital technologies as they need to. So our programs are all aligned to the TPAC model. And what that means is that there's an intersection of technology, content, and pedagogical skills, and finding the right balance for teachers based on the contextually relevant sort of aspect. And I think this for us is the key element that we try to embed, that we want inquiry-based teaching. We want to have teachers that are looking at gamification. We want to be able to use project-based learning, but we need to be mindful of the resources and the constraints that teachers have within their terrains and schools. And then we look at, a range of programs. Our programs range from leadership for principals, office-based educators, education officials. And so we run it, basically depending on the needs. And I heard, your stats around teachers feeling overworked, administratively feeling burdened. So all of these sort of aspects, technology is a lever of change, and it can actually impact and alleviate those stresses that teachers feel if we do it correctly. And I think, let me leave it there for now.
Thanks very much, Omashni. No, we'll definitely get into a lot more. And thank you to those of you in our audience who've already posed questions. Thank you very much. Please do keep them coming. So that's great there. Charles, I want to call on you now. As the CEO of NASCI, NASCI is obviously collaborative structure, education NPOs. How does teacher development and mentorship fit into the work that NASCI and its members do?
Thanks, Sheldon. Good morning, everyone. Look, I think so just to position who NASCI is and what NASCI does, NASCI is a national body. It's an association of mostly NGOs, but also for-profits and funders that are working in the education sector. It was born out of a need from government to have a platform to engage with civil society. So, I think it has a seat at the table, and its role is twofold. The one is to support governments to get the NGO sector essentially more organized. So, how do we take consolidated solutions to government that have been well thought through and say, this is the best these are the best that we have to offer around the problems and priorities that you are wanting to solve at scale. And it's something that we've struggled with as a sector for many years. We fragmented. There's amazing innovation happening. You guys would see it in your handbook all the time that the work that people are doing is, incredibly committed and lots of high impact, but it's not necessarily being consolidated and then being packaged in a way that government can do something constructive with it. So that's what we're trying to do. And teacher development is the same. It's the same thing. So it's one of the pillars or buckets that we're trying to work with our members and government to integrate. I mean, it has to be one of the most important. I mean, I think it's why you've got it as a topic. Like the triangle that Danny was talking about, the teachers and the learners are the ones that are at the heart of the issue. So if you've got a good teacher in the classroom who's well resourced, the child's going to get what they need. And at the moment, we don't have that in an equitable way across our system, and that's why we're struggling. So I think, when I look at this challenge, I think there are a couple of things that come up for me from NASCI's perspective in how we're trying to organize and be a coordinating body to support the department. And the first one is like, is it local or is it systemic? Like what kind of intervention is it? Because those are two quite separate things, but are important. It's an important decision that organizations need to make or funders need to make, because local is great. They're helping 6 schools or 1 school with their hardware and connectivity and giving them content, and those children are going to get value. But if you're thinking systemically, then it's about, well, how do we make sure that the work we've done or have done over time, it becomes a little bit more sustainable and embedded. And that's where you've got to be thinking about the district. How do we capacitate districts? And this mentorship and coaching model is now becoming almost a given in any program. I see it everywhere with with most organizations that are running some form of training. They'll have a coaching element or a group coaching element because it's the easiest way for people to integrate new skills into their work, into their actual lived experience. So it is a strong methodology for skills development, and that's the case for teacher development as well. I think the foundational learning space. If I look at the work that was done by the Department of Education in piloting the EGRS program, coaching is like the one of the core pillars. If you've got a strong coach, you're supporting the foundational teacher, you're going to have a teacher who's going to get better skills. So coaching is definitely a strong driver. I think the other thing that needs to be thought through is how are, because I've seen, if I look at the department, you've got pre-service and in-service. And those are also a good choice to make, because the pre-service teachers are sitting in universities. So I mean, an amazing stat that I only recently found out is that there's about 66,000 teachers in training at UNISA. It's more than half of all our teachers in training in the country. It's an enormous amount. So if you think about that teacher demographic dividend that's coming with teachers retiring, UNISA is actually producing more than half of the new teachers that are going to go in there. So if we can support UNISA to be better at what it does, you start really thinking long-term and systemically about that. So the TICSA program, some of you might have come across, I think that's a really strong example of a collaboration that is thinking about teacher development, pre-service. Trialogue were one of the founders of that consortium, but it's a teacher internship program where government got together with funders, with implementing partners, and some of private sector like Trialogue and others who were like, let's think about over a period of time whether we can come up with a model that could then be integrated by government around teacher internships. And TICSA is in its 5th year, And I think what, NASCI's been part of it for the last 2 years. What's been interesting to see is how challenging it is to collaborate, not just with government. I think there's stuff you can do there that can work quite quickly, but actually the NGO sector struggles because we've sometimes got conflicting motives and agendas and needs. And I think TICSA was a really good example of or a pilot. And there's quite a lot of literature out there that TICSA's produced. If you go to their website, you can see of lessons learned around how to collaborate well. So, I think the pre-service in-service is worth thinking about because it's you pre-service, you've got universities involved. In-service, it's different. It's and that's what Omashani and Danny are talking about there. You're talking about like what programs can we run that support teachers in their job today. And I think EdTech is a amazing lever. I think one of the challenges there is there's so many things, and people like Omashani have got a good bird's eye view. And the challenge is like, well, how do we help schools, teachers navigate which tech to use when, for what, and how to consolidate some of that and almost get providers to be verified on quality. That would be something that would be a good thing to think about. Like there's just so many options, but teachers sometimes I think are overwhelmed by what to take on. But I mean, looking forward, like is EdTech the silver bullet? And like Omashani said, it's only going to get you so far, but it definitely starts to level the playing field around access to high quality materials, high quality learning that we otherwise don't get. So I think it's a balance. Obviously, not everyone can access the EdTech because they don't have connectivity or the hardware. But I think those things are changing. And then I just want to spend a quick few minutes talking about districts because I think districts are underutilized in our thinking about teacher development because most of the coaching course programs that I see in being driven by nonprofits, funded by CSI or philanthropy, they're expensive and they're not scalable. And we've seen that in the TICSA program where they did a cost benefit analysis and to take a coaching program where you've got a paid for resource in a classroom, it's like a double teacher. It's very difficult to do financially. So we've got to think about, well, who else can do this for us? I mean, I was at a discussion recently with a coaching program where the district was saying, like, we wish that all our schools could get this kind of coaching and mentoring support. So they're doing good work. Districts are supportive. Teachers were then and presenting like it's working. It's improving learner outcomes. But the challenge is cost, and I think that districts need to be trained to do what the coaches do. And there's obviously a compromise when you do that. And some skeptics are like, well, it'll never work. Our district officials just can't take that on. But I think if you're a curriculum facilitator or subject advisor in a district and you're given more coaching skills, you start to make these things a bit more sustainable, where the scale of the model of coaching can be replicated at a cost that's covered by the state. So I think those kind of that kind of thinking needs to come in, but obviously locally, like coaching is working, like where funders are funding coaches into those schools, it's helping those kids, and that's fantastic. I think we've just got to feed the information back so that it can be utilized elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, that's enough for me.
Thanks, Charles. And I think that's a really interesting point to, I suppose, end your opening with in terms of that the coaching is working. And I think for CSI professionals and managers on the call and those listening to this afterwards, there is a lot of good work that's being done that can be, so it's not reinventing the wheel. If it's an area that you're considering or would consider to invest in, there's data, there's research, there's anecdotal, qualitative evidence as well in terms of where it's working and what programs can be scaled already, so that investment can start working almost from day one. Danny, I want to go back to you in terms of, Telkom's strengths, and if all the speakers could switch on their cameras and mics, we're now going into the discussion section of it. Danny, in terms of technology, it has the potential to be obviously a great equalizer, and we're starting to see that, and maybe an event like COVID sped that along. It's obviously the core strength of what Telkom does, and you leverage that to help teachers in that regard. How does the model you use, technology, pedagogy, content, knowledge, how does that model help you achieve maximum impact?
Yeah, Sheldon, we need to come clean here and admit that in as much as we think that technology is not a lever to many, which you've had with the two of my panelists. I mean, fellow panelists, that technology it's a lever, and how we see it as Telkom Foundation is that you cannot just say we're investing in terms of ICT. You need to do a groundwork and then do your feasibility study in terms of where we are coming, where we are going. First and foremost, we'll appreciate that we have challenges in the deep rural areas. But in those deep rural areas, how do we then first make sure that we roll out the technology in terms of bringing in the infrastructure to ensure that our network is stable and it is accessible without any challenges and problems. So when you do that, then you start engaging in the district. What are the challenges that the districts have in terms of the use of ICT in their space and all those things? And then you do that, and then you will see it more when SchoolNet comes in, and when they go to a school, we don't just do a blanket approach. They will then do a survey of what skills and a gap does the school have? What is it? What type of intervention that do they need within that school? So we bring that in, and in terms of content, following the ATP in terms of the development of that in that regard, how do we then take that content, put it on the cloud, and make the cloud accessible to everyone by zero rating, and making sure that teachers, learners are able to access that. And you don't just also do once-off training. You have to do continuous training. You come into this time, and then you have to come back again and make sure that it happens in that regard. And then those who are trained, and then you get champions who would lead in that space, and who will also mentor the new cohort of teachers that are coming in the space. Thank you.
Danny, just to stay with you, and before I come to Amashni, in terms of the outcomes that we see, right, or that you would like to see, how do you track the outcomes? Because obviously there's the teacher who's the direct beneficiary of whether it's the coaching, continuous development, and the like, but then you've got the children who are ultimately, I suppose, the real beneficiaries, because stronger teachers means likelihood of better outcomes for the children. How do you track the outcomes to also see if the programs and the infrastructure that you're putting in place is working? There's a return on investment, and it's not just we're not sure if there's an outcome or an impact from this.
So there's many ways of doing it, and on our side is that when we implement each and every program, we ensure that we have the monitoring and evaluating criterion in terms of each and every program that we do. with that as well, when you are doing teacher development, monitoring and evaluation is not something that happens at the end. It's continuous with the training and the reports that you get, the assessments of the teachers, the number of teachers that you've impacted vis-a-vis the number of learners that are impacted by the teachers that have been trained. It also some one ways of tracking the success and then the impact that has been laid out by the implementing partners, but also the investors in terms of the telecom foundations and others that are investing into the teacher development and what we will also need to take account is the level of confidence and an appreciation of the teachers after the training, and seeing them now actually using and embracing the technology. Then that tells you that you are on the right path.
Omashni, from your perspective, what are some of the outcomes that positive outcomes that you've seen from the various programs that you run, the added tools that, some schools may be getting or teachers may be getting for the first time?
I think in terms of outcomes, the first sort of thing is, one is that a teacher feels confident in the use of technologies for teaching and learning. And I think that is key, because for a long time, our classrooms perhaps have been stagnant in terms of how teaching and learning is happening, because we've got the thinking that we've got the learners that are just sitting passively, sort of, hearing what teachers are teaching. But through the digital teaching and learning, what we're seeing impressively is that the teachers are now engaging more fully in terms of what content they've got to teach. How do they teach it with engagement? So leveraging of multimedia. So for example, if they were teaching, let's say geography, for example, they'd be able to look at it and say, okay, so let's say we were teaching erosion. You'd be able to use a tool like Google Earth, for example, and find the Drakensberg and see erosion over time in a time space, and be able to understand and then talk about what in real terms what that meant. If you were talking about life sciences and you were talking, if you're looking at a textbook, and back in the day when we were learning, you were learning from a static image and you're learning from text only. And whereas now with multimedia, you can see the live heart sort of working. You've got technology and tools that can augment and look at AI sort of rendering of a heart, for example. And these are sort of elements that we need to be bringing more into the classroom, and teachers are using it. And this in itself becomes something that teachers are being able to use. And on the one level, that is the outcome, is where teachers are being able to look at how they teach, what they're teaching, and then repurposing it in a more engaging format so that the learners are learning, in fact, what we're trying to teach. But on a superficial level, when we're looking at teachers' administration, another outcome is that we ensure that by using technology, teachers are able to do their lesson planning. So, for example, where one would typically, back in the day, we used to have teachers where they just go with the textbook and say, okay, so which page where we were yesterday, now carrying on. But here we are encouraging planning beforehand so that teachers think cohesively about a plan for how do we think about and implement the teaching of this particular curriculum. And when we then plan properly, we're then able to design the learning effectively. We're designing the assessment to check whether the learning has happened. And then more importantly, we're then able to use like Excel sheets, for example, to use, to have the data true and valid. And this is a consequence that we're seeing in SA SAMS as well. So where we're seeing that we need to ensure that administratively teachers are using data and the evidence that is coming through that more cohesively, because that then informs a reflective practice in terms of how they then teach going forward. So the outcomes are many. And yes, learner outcomes are important. And I think what Daniel was alluding to is that some of the telecom partners, particularly also like Trialogue or ProTech or Reflective Learning, there's independent sort of verification of the data in terms of learner outcomes. And it's very important in academia when you're thinking about it, is that we expect learner outcomes to increase year on year because they're learning. But what we need to be measuring is what's the differential of that as a result of the intervention. And I think there's independent auditing that happens in terms of what that looks like. So let me stop there.
Thanks very much, Amashni. On that, I think that's key. Just Charles, just I suppose a comment from not really a question, but more a comment to your, well, not to your point, but I mean raising UNISA. We've got Togida Peterson Safudin saying, as a DH that mentors, I think that's district head, new teachers, we find that UNISA teachers struggle to teach using the correct pedagogy. And I think that just goes to the point, that Giles made, in terms of if we support institutions and bodies like UNISA, where you've got the great scale, because of the numbers coming out, you're likely to have a greater impact down the line. Simpiwe, thank you. Papama, thank you very much for your questions. Bev da Costa, I will pose that to our panelists as well. So thank you very much for those. Keep them coming as well. Charles, a question for you, and I suppose a more soft question in a sense, in that this is about relationship and collaborating and not really technical skills as such. But are there suggestions on how we collaborate better as NGOs? Bev asks. We're expected to collaborate. NGOs are also businesses competing within the funding environment. What can we learn from others? And I suppose, a similar question we've been posing or discussion we've been having in various forums, for the last 18 months is the same thing around corporates, right? Usually you're probably competing in your traditional spaces, but there is greater scope to collaborate in the CSI space to scale resources, scale impact as well. Charles, what would be your suggestion, to Bev in terms of how NGOs can collaborate better?
Thanks, Sheldon. Thanks, Bev. I think it's what we're seeing at NASCI is when collaboration is funded. And what I mean by that is when a funder sees collaboration as a important part of the impact they're wanting to make. So I'll give you an example, like in the TICSA program, there's a big component of the TICSA program, which is a collaboration. A big part of it is being funded. So the project management office, the person driving the collaboration conversation, getting the right people in the room, organizing the next steps, the actions, keeping people accountable. Somebody's holding the center. So when that funding is available, collaboration generally works better. And people are more open to sharing their IP and sharing some of their best practices, etc. But I think where there's less, when funding isn't available and one organization who's generally got more resources is driving these collaboration efforts, it kind of runs out of road. So that's the one part. I think when when a collaboration receives funding, it's just got more traction. But on the bigger question that Bev poses around, like we are competitive on some level. I think we're being pushed, Bev, more and more. I'm seeing it by funders to align with government priorities as a collective versus as like one organization or one program. And so I think we've started as NGOs working in the space and as funders to be thinking about like, okay, what is the government priority and what's the best that we can do collectively to align with that priority? And so I think we're going to start seeing going forward more calls for proposals from funders for not just like them not going to organizations directly, but them saying, and we are seeing it in things like Float, that literacy initiative that's happening in 3 provinces, where the funder said, organizations get together, here's the problem we're wanting you to solve, and you need to do it collectively. And then people are going to be comfortable because they're getting paid for the work that they do, and they bring their IP fully, and it's less competitive. So I think that's my short answer. But I also think organizations need to start thinking more strategically about who does either similar work or who does tangential work that makes your program stronger. So, for example, if you're in a literacy program, because literacy and foundational learning is getting a lot of support, to run a good literacy program in a school, you need leadership. So, it makes sense for a literacy organization to partner with somebody who's doing leadership and coaching to say, let's go into a partnership. Let's think how we can collaboratively build a model, and then we take that to a group of funders. Or we go to government first and say, let's think about where we could do this in one district, and then together go to the funders. So I think those are some of the things that will help that. But at the end of the day, it is competitive. But we are being pushed by funders to think more strategically and systemically.
Thanks, Giles. Papama, to answer your question, and we can, I'll put it to the speakers as well, but Papama Mateza asks, is there any form of support for early childhood development teachers, or is the focus on teachers who are in foundation and senior phase only? So Papama, one thing that we will also add to the article is a link to that SACE strategic plan, because what the department is now, at least from the plan, with the continued professionalization of the ECD sector, obviously pushing registrations, the other element of that professionalization is looking at teachers. So having them qualified or registered at least, having a look at how does it filter into the higher education training, where the ECD training would happen, and have them plug into the process and the framework that, for instance, you've got at SACE with the continuous development programs, teacher development programs, to ensure that they fit in there. So it may well be early days in terms of that, but the department's certainly looking at how do we extend the teacher development that you have at foundation and primary school phase and senior phase. How do you extend that into early childhood development? Because we do know the importance of obviously that early learning phase for children, and the importance it beds in their minds. And on we've actually addressed this in some of our webinars, or at least one of our webinars and at conference this year. So Papama, you can find more of that on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. You can just search for early childhood development, and you'll get more there. Danny, I want to turn to you in terms of the psychosocial element. Obviously from some of the research that we're seeing, how teachers are feeling. We know that many schools are overcrowded. It's often the only school in the area. The teachers, just the context of teachers may be very difficult. And we obviously have started to look, as in many other fields and areas of society, the mental health of practitioners. How does Telkom work that into its investment in education, the psychosocial support? Obviously, it's there for the pupils, which is something that you've championed. How does it relate to teachers?
So sorry, my mic was off. Sheldon.
No worries.
You see, Mr. Gillett spoke about the collaboration and partnership with the districts, and you will appreciate the fact that when part of our strategy is, in as much as we have the collaboration and partnership with National Department of Basic Education, but we also go to the grassroots where the districts and are at, because the districts then they are the ones who give support to to the schools, and they are closer to the teachers and in many ways. So our strategy is we first and foremost, we partner with the district. We go to the school. When we get to the school, we identify what are the challenges within the school. Then we place what you call that the social workers. So we place two people per school. By the way, it's a social worker and someone who's an expert when it comes to psychosocial support as well, so that these two can collaborate within that space. If there's social intervention that needs to take place, then we can refer the case to the Department of Social Development so that they can come and intervene within the school. For the teachers as well, we must appreciate that when the work is being done in the school, we make sure that the access is not only for the learners. Remember the triangle of education. We have the learner, we have the teacher, we have the parent. So that then becomes the support of that triangle of education. The learner may need psychosocial support assistance. The teacher also equally needs that, so that it can assist them in their working space and an environment, and make it somewhat easier for them to do the work, as well as the parents. So we give access to all three key to this triangle of education, access to get this type of support. But also you must appreciate that since the inception of Lifeline, Childline, and all these support channels, Telkom has been in the forefront in terms of making sure that we zero rate and make sure that the toll-free number becomes generally toll-free, whether you are using a cell phone and you are with the other networks, or our competitors, or you are with Telkom. It's zero rated, and then we do it so that it makes it easy for a learner, for a parent, as well as a teacher, to use those facilities outside of the school, and it doesn't become a burden for them in terms of, I don't have airtime, I don't have data, I don't have this. Therefore, they are able to access these counselors as well as social workers at ease, not also outside of the schooling environment. And it's key for us, because we want to have a schooling environment that is free, accessible for all, and not only free and accessible, but it must be an environment that is conducive for teaching and learning, which then makes it easy for us to fund and stay in on course in terms of that aspect.
I'm actually to turn to you, just in terms of, I'm thinking about the practical, people on the call who are looking at ECD. I know I mentioned to Papama the greater professionalization, and obviously that drawing ECD in. In terms of some of the courses and resources that SchoolNet has available, are there any that ECD teachers can benefit from by following?
I think the key sort of element around the programs that we offer is that it is applicable to teachers across the spectrum, and it relies on whatever curriculum content that one is meant to be doing. So in ECD, you're looking at play therapy, you're looking at the focus on play, but planned play and focused play, and looking at what that can be done in terms of leveraging foundational literacies. And I think some of the work that we've done in not necessarily ECD, but grade R1 and 2 is around the teacher being able to, for example, use music, because you want in gross motor, fine motor skills to come forthright. So you're looking at ways in which that can be sort of leveraged of technology, because you can easily play a YouTube video in a class, in terms of the nursery rhymes that the babies are meant to be sort of working through, and then looking at how that can be done in a classroom setting, and looking at ways in which technology can be a driver of change in those sort of ways and means. So there's a range of programs, and as I said, our work spans across the spectrum, because the curriculum content is differing, but using technology is purposely used based on whomever we are teaching in that space.
Okay. And then, Martin, you've obviously moved over the course of time, to adopting more hybrid or online only type of courses. How has that had an impact on your reach and I suppose the outcomes for the teachers?
With great difficulty, I must say. We work in mostly under-resourced schools. So because it's digital literacy and digital technologies, the ethical question was, okay, so now how can we ask a teacher who may or may not be digitally literate to connect online so that we can teach them digital literacy? So during COVID, particularly, this was sort of foregrounded because now suddenly teachers had no sort of mechanisms in terms of reaching the children. So what were the ways in which one can do that? And we saw certainly during COVID, teachers found that actually they could be online where there was access. However, the bulk of our sort of interventions is still face-to-face, primarily because we're working in under-resourced schools and there's a trust relationship that often needs to be built with teachers because there's a fear. There's a huge fear in terms of technology use along the expectations of what teachers are meant to be doing with these things, these gadgets that are coming to schools. So there's a low confidence in terms of what teachers are expected to do. So being in person, showcasing in school what the technology teachers have access to in their own environment and showing them how that can be used and optimized for use in the classroom teaching practice is one of the key drivers of change. But I think for us as SchoolNet, we have multiple sort of modes of delivery. So face-to-face, we do some hybrid where some are initial and the rest follow-up support is online, or we do online only where access and technology infrastructure is not an issue. But we know South Africa is just so disparate that in many of our sort of interventions, even where data is available, and the cost of data is another story completely. But even where there's data available, sometimes connectivity is not available because there's no points of presence in those particular areas. So, being online becomes an access issue. So there's a number of challenges around that, but we offer multiple modes based on what our end user and our beneficiaries need.
Okay. Charles, I want to come to you, and suddenly the time has flown by and we've got 15 minutes left. As I warned you, 90 minutes is clearly not enough. But Charles, I want to come to you with some of the one of the questions that we did have here. Let me just get that down. So McDonald Pambaniso asks a question, and I suppose it relates, or there's a jump off from what Omarshini just mentioned now in terms of, being able to connect and just get training and get connectivity out into under-resourced areas, into rural areas. And I imagine the same being in person, because it would take time to travel there, some distance from towns and metros and whatever. So the question is, Giles, what policy frameworks and partnerships are needed to support sustainable, culturally relevant mentorship and professional development models for teachers, specifically in under-resourced areas? Now, obviously, giving your take on what could facilitate that type of outcome.
Sure. I mean, I think that, the department are working on I think they're working on some of the mentoring policies that, they've got quite a strong principals induction program. I think this TICSA program is feeding into that, and that's hopefully going to be able to influence how our teachers, which are mostly coming from UNISA, have an internship experience, because that, one of the things that came out around that early mentoring support in a school when you come into a school as a teacher is critical, and that's what is helped with an internship program. So I think we need it, Sheldon. I think that the department has got some. I'm not close enough to it, There are people that would be that are that are dedicated to this teacher development space. One thing I want to add that hasn't come up that I think is interesting to this debate is the speed at which AI is moving around providing like very easy to access support. And I think the department and innovators around teacher development and this thing around mentorship, because a chatbot or a AI coach is a very real thing that could be in place quite soon, and like what I'm seeing is, like we had a collaboration of, I think, 5 or 6 coaching and mentoring organizations within NASCI that got together and they shared their collective impact measures, and they looked at how they could consolidate them to work together more effectively. Now that starts to, that kind of information starts to feed into, could there be something where you bring those two worlds together, where you have, Omashani, the stuff you're doing on the tech side being integrated into AI. Like I don't know how quickly that's moving, but at the same time, the change management, which is hard around actually using the tech, is another thing completely. But I just wanted to bring that in because I think it's going to be in classrooms in developing countries and made available. And obviously the usage will be based on how people can, their comfort with tech. And that's not, like Omashani and Danny are saying, is not easy in rural areas. People just don't gravitate. But I think that opportunity for large scale teacher coaching and support is going to be available quite soon.
And I think one of our colleagues at Trialogue shared an article, and basically the headline went, technology moves fast, but people don't. And I think it speaks to you, even in the most perfect environments, and Danny and Omashani, you will know as well that, even the most perfect environments, change management and adoption of new technologies, new systems, takes some time. But I do want to add, and I found this really fascinating. I attended the IPASA symposium this week, and one of the speakers was actually from an ed tech company, and she was speaking about the work that they're doing in 3 countries in Africa, and how they were able to go in, and the process of partnering with government, having investment so that they could ultimately scale the solutions. But one of the things she showed was the power of virtual reality coupled with AI, to your point, Giles. So this training was able to take people through scenarios that they may face in the workplace, like soft skills training, like conflict management, and you're able to practice these conversations, these scenarios using AI and virtual reality, so that you gain practice. So you're working those muscles before you actually need it. And I'm sure that at some stage that may filter down into ed tech as well. Danny, from your perspective, I just want to ask you, how do we ensure that, because there's so much investment in education and there's so many institutions, bodies, NPOs, organizations working within education. I mean, we just look at the size of NASCI and bodies such as TICSA and the like, which gives you an indication. How do we ensure that we align the best practice in terms of coaching, mentoring, training, so that you don't have teachers going through the cycle where there may be intervention fatigue, or 1 year, one service provider has come in and they've, adopted a certain philosophy and a certain system. 2 years down the line, when that program has ended, another service provider and another partnership comes in, and then they change it. So, teachers are saying, well, what are we doing? Are we throwing the old stuff out? How do we ensure that we align the good work that is being done, but maybe, isn't being connected at this stage?
Giles put it very nicely earlier on, and I think it's at the beginning of his opening statement, where he says, if we need to be open to collaborate. And in that, then we expose ourselves to the needs of the public, not only the needs of the public, but to understand the problem. And us addressing us addressing that problem, we need to understand, have that understanding and that knowledge in that regard. And I fully agree with him in that statement, and in the context of um, us engaging from time to time. And I think we need to engage very often in terms of what are the needs on the ground. How do we improve from time to time, so that we don't shortchange the funders, we don't shortchange the institutions themselves, and in our partnership and collaboration, we need to have that understanding from, and I think it needs to be driven from the National Department of Education as the custodian of education. This conversation, or this engagement with all the partners, with all the NGOs, social your unions and social impact organizations, where we engage from time to time in terms of what are the needs on the ground, and then how do we address those needs. And the new cohort of teachers that are coming, what sort of skills do they need? Because the mentorship is it will happen in different levels, and the coaching as well, it will have to happen in different levels. And in order for us to not to come in and
Oh, Danny, we've lost audio. Can you hear us?
yes. Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry,
Yeah, your audio is back.
I don't know. Yeah. So that Sheldon will assist in terms of knowing what type of programs and then initiatives that are needed in which portfolio, or in which school, or program, and the mentorship. We also need to it's like um, me having, and I'm sorry for using this, and it's an educational program. If I have a challenge with alcoholism, I need to admit that I have a challenge with alcoholism. And if I'm a teacher as well, I know I'm lagging in certain aspects of my content development and articulation. I need to admit that, and then I open. In me admitting, I'm opening myself to assistance from others, and then I embrace the coaching, I embrace the mentorship, and I need to walk that journey and understand that, so that I can be able to deliver that type of quality education, quality support, and mentorship to the learners. Because mentorship for the teachers, it's also mentorship for the learners to develop and improve in terms of the school career as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Danny. Well, we've come to the last 4 minutes. I want to go to our speakers just for their quick 1 minute closing comment, suggestion for our audience. Omasni, let me start with you. What would be your one tip for NPOs or corporates on the line in terms of, being more effective in supporting teacher development mentoring?
Oh, one tip, you say.
Two, three.
I think the key sort of aspect is around isolated technology donations, and the misnomer around the fact that we wanting to have the quick wins to take a fabulous photo opportunity, cut a ribbon, launch a center. But what's obviously missed is the fact that providing access is just one piece of a puzzle. It is a whole system that requires support when you provide technology resources or resources into an environment, and that requires the hard work, which is really working with human beings and working with teachers to allow them an opportunity to find the need, to see the value and appreciate what that change can bring. And that can only come through the coaching and the mentorship models that we use, and looking at what that change management management and the leadership of that looks like in a school structure. And along with content, along with the life cycle of these devices, all of these things need to be considered when you're doing technology intervention. But for NPOs, I think what I would leave them with is the fact that we need to do more in terms of understanding what the policy drivers and the frameworks of change are requiring of us in terms of the change that needs to happen within the education sector. And as NPOs in the we are supporting government. And if you don't know what the policies are, and I think one of the comments was that, there aren't frameworks. South Africa has fabulous frameworks, fabulous policies. What we don't do well is understanding what that policy means in real terms, in terms of implementation. And I think what NPOs can do more of is to understand that where that fits in, and to avoid once-off workshops where you just superficially just recording attendance and saying, what a wonderful job I've done. So we need to look more deeper at the kind of impact that we're leaving and the change that we are sort of trying to engage with, and whether in fact we've done that, and to afford ourselves a deeper reflection of what that looks like.
Thanks very much, Omasni.
Sure.
Just before I go to Giles and Danny to wrap up, we'd like to post our rating poll just for you to rate this webinar. I've also popped in the webinar feedback survey. It will just take a couple of minutes. As I'd mentioned, it really does help us create these and craft them for you. Togita, I've shared NASCI's website as well as SchoolNet's website. There are resources on both of them in terms of training, development that is available. I think to you as well as Queen, you can also have a look at the SACE website. That's SACE, the Council of Educators. They also have resources and that and information and material available, and through that you can you can go through and hopefully go down a rabbit hole that leads you to the type of resources and coaching and mentoring and development tools that you need as well. So thank you very much for all of your questions, for all of your comments. It was really robust. Thank you very much for engaging with us there and sharing your experiences and thoughts with us. It really has made for a rich discussion. Giles, to come to you, what in your parting thought, what would be, suppose, your tip, or what you'd want us to leave, want to leave NPOs and corporates with?
So thanks, Sheldon. For the NPOs, I think it's just reiterating this idea that there's opportunity in collaboration, that there's opportunity in improving the product or the overall impact that you're driving into teacher development, whether you're in coaching or whether you're in actual pedagogical support. There's opportunity in collaboration. And then to the funders, I want to challenge them to be thinking about how do they fund that, as opposed to just funding programs. So start thinking about how do you fund collaboration so that it can be done properly. Because the organizations can do it, they just need that they're not going to be able to do it if it's not funded. And it's very difficult to manage. So those would be the two things that I would be wanting people to think about. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Giles. Danny, over to you for the last word.
Thank you. I mean, my two fellow panelists have already said it. In collaboration, partnerships, and not only partnerships with NGOs and as corporates as well. We can collaborate and partner to Giles' point, find a way of funding an initiative, not just a program, for NGOs is that when we need to, as standing talking on behalf of corporates, we want to partner and collaborate with credible NGOs who are willing to make an impact out there, because we are all about impact. And if we can do the work in such a way that tomorrow, when we talk about these initiatives, it will be recognized that this is work that has been done for the benefit of the end user, or the benefactor on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you to our panelists, Omashni Naidu, the Executive Director at SchoolNet South Africa, Giles Gillette, the CEO of NASCI. Thank you very much, Danny Matabula, Project Manager, ICT Integration at the Telkom Foundation, who partnered with us on this webinar. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us today and making time to spend with us. I know we're all very, very busy. Thank you for your interaction, your engagement. Just a reminder that the webinar will be, the full recording as well as a write-up of the webinar will be made available in the next 2 weeks on the Knowledge Hub, and will be mailed to everyone who registers it well, has registered it well. Please do share it with your colleagues and others who you think could benefit from it. Hang around if you want to make sure that you've got all the links that have been posted, some really handy links coming through on today's discussion as well. Hannah, thank you very much for sharing that CPD course for ECD. Thank you very much to our speakers as well for your engagement, to all of you this morning. I will also just share quickly the Trialogue Business and Society Handbook link, which I mentioned we are launching on the 2nd of December, Giving Tuesday. If you'd like to pre-order your copy, coming out and learning more about the theme, I've just posted that link there. So thank you very much for staying with us. We will see you in the new year. This is our last webinar for 2025. Thank you for all the support throughout the year on all of these webinars. They've really been rich, engaging, and we look forward to sharing more knowledge with you and discussing and connecting with you in the new year. Until then, have a good festive season and a good end of the year.